again, and welcome to the real world industry analysis by Astranti for the Montel company. That is the basis for the August 2018 sitting in the case study. So let's get straight down to it. This is going to be a comprehensive look at the industry in as much detail as you will be expected to possibly even know, and probably more. And we're going to compare each section, ranging from history to current contemporary issues, with our pre-scene knowledge from the actual document we were given, and we're going to wrap that up into the best kind of exam prep you can gain from all the contextual information out there about the camera industry. So, without further ado, let's step straight into how we're going to utilize this analysis. So, first and foremost, we're going to expect that this is going to take the view of our Montel job description. We're a financial manager and our primary responsibilities are associated with management accountant, and we report to a senior manager who then in turn reports to the finance director. So very important, a step up from the OCS, and we're going to be thinking very much so with our P2 caps on, especially given our role. Now as we move down here, we can see the basis of the camera industry, and historically it's a very, very old industry. The first kinds of cameras coming all the way in the 16th to 17th centuries, but we're not super interested in that. Feel free to look at that in your own time. It's quite nice as some context. However, we're going to move down to this more contemporary information about more recent years. And the important part is the advent of TLRs and SLRs, which essentially are to do with the reflexes of the camera mechanism, and then its addition into digital versions of these cameras. So no more analog, contraptions. We're going to be doing the full digital experience from the 1970s. So there were a number of prototypes from that period, and it's worth noting that prior to the 1970s, they were all relatively, analog, or even worse in terms of functionality, in terms of generating our photographs. So what does this all mean? In terms of the industry at large, the history is not going to have the biggest relevance as far as this whole document goes, but there are some key points. Montel was founded in the 1920s. Now, this will mean that they have been founded during the time where 35mm cameras were first introduced, and they have been through the industry from its transitions from the TLR, SLR, and into the digital era of now. So they are accustomed to change. And we actually know from the pre-scene, and if you checked out the pre-scene videos, you'll have an even better understanding of this, is that Montel do need to adapt to a number of changes that are threatening profits. And essentially, the connotations for our R&D spend will mean that they're experienced. So if they were to have a new project, it would not be, out of the question to have an internal investment on a new product or a future market, rather than an inorganic method of growth. In fact, organic growth was mentioned in the pre-scene specifically. So, that's our takeaway point from the historical section. Next, we're going to look at the various products, and I'll skim through these very briefly. We have the compact, the mirrorless, and this was essentially referenced as the compact system cameras, the CSCs in the pre-scene, so remember that one. And we have the adventure style cameras or action cams, the DSLR in various forms, and the medium format, which are very, very old school. These are your bridge style cameras. They are pretty much going out of fashion. So, what does this mean in terms of R&D? What is the current goings on in the market? Well, lower budget customers are essentially where R&D will be focused for a number of companies. They don't want to lose out to the smartphone, which we'll get to, but they do want to, meet the demand for these lower budget customers, because they often, the quantities involved with these kind of cameras are often way higher, just because they're more affordable. Likewise, software seems to be leading consumer demand, because there are physical limits on the camera itself as a device. Consumers are increasingly wanting more software upgrades rather than adding tiny margins to the hardware performance, because ultimately adding like half a megapixel or slightly higher resolution on something that's already really crisp and lovely doesn't matter that much to a number of these enthusiasts anymore. What matters is that the software is pinpoint, potentially protecting their content, processing it faster, that kind of thing. And also there is a image sensory technology, both software and hardware based, that Sony have pioneered as like a huge investment project, and we're going to see that again later. That again is a demonstration that cameras specifically as a whole product are not actually the be all and end all, and Montel have a lot of opportunity to capitalize on that. That's essentially where we're going with this. Montel need to expand, they need to diversify, and in terms of R&D, they have a number of potential options, and that could be software, some sort of component hardware like the sensors, and in terms of products, they basically have everything. The problem is, from the pre-scene, that two of those products are going to be declining rapidly based on smartphone usage and the cannibalization of bridge cameras by the compact system camera surge. So now we're on to customers and marketing. So who buys a DSLR, for example? That's basically the big range that Montel were interested in. Well, who buys them? Well, typically the sort of budget DSLRs are going to be in a sort of younger bracket, as we see here, 16 to 40, those kinds of enthusiasts. And maybe because of the timing historically of digital cameras, but those in the age groups of 40 to 65 are far more likely to be the types of people purchasing the ultra expensive range that Montel have. And they're probably the kind of demographic that Montel need to get more and more of, and market better to, and distribute better to, as you'll see in the pre-scene videos. And this will ultimately mean that there's a very different approach that is required for each of these demographics, who are then in turn interested in very different ranges of camera, potentially due to their own budget or just due to their level of interest. Gender wise, it's pretty even. The older demographics are typically men, but more and more of the younger demographics that want a camera that's pretty good, like a budget DSLR, are typically female. So with this in mind, if you were to assume demand is relatively stagnant proportionally, we will have a relatively even split between men and women. So there's not too much sort of gender styled advertising that's required. Moving on down to changing trends, we can see the action camera and other niche cameras are doing very, very well. And similarly to the software demand, 4K resolution, which is kind of a software slash hardware hybrid quality, is booming. In fact, as you can see from the image here, GoPro have a 4K Ultra HD GoPro action camera. So typically the merging of these two concepts are quite popular, I imagine. So what actually matters? Well, essentially in terms of the value chain, we are looking to add quality that befits the type of customer purchasing the different ranges. So the type of value addition from Montel's perspective needs to alter based on what range it is. So if you read this last bit here, it shows you how my sort of thinking goes. But ultimately, the difference in age group depending on sort of what camera they're buying and stuff like that, and gender based on what they're buying, it will mean that the value addition specifically, not necessarily the advertising, but the value addition needs to differ across ranges. It can't just be quality, and I believe they will see growth if they alter this extreme focus on quality to be a little bit more flexible based on who typically buys those cameras. So in terms of changing demands, the physical limits will mean that software is probably the way to go, at least on the high-end cameras where there's not much room to increase the hardware. And in terms of, the changing trends, we can see that again it lends itself to software trends and more niche applications which a smartphone cannot undertake. So you're trying to circumvent the smartphone sort of impact by going to more niche cameras, or to improve the software to a degree, but the functionality becomes very appealing for these high-end cameras compared to, say, a more substitute style camera or smartphone. Hello, it's me again. I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time to first extend my hope that you enjoyed the free sample that you've just viewed, but also to just sort of explain what else Astranti do to help you pass your exam really effectively, provided you found our sample particularly interesting and insightful, of course. So, of course, we have a study text for every module, ranging from P1 to F3, and the certificate level is also free on our website. So we have study texts throughout the CIMA course, every module you could hope to study. The certificate level are free, as I mentioned, and then the rest of them, ranging from P1 to F3, are all available to purchase. Alongside this, if you're not so much a study text kind of student and you prefer a visual way of learning, we have the course videos. We essentially break down the study text into bite-sized presentations with a walkthrough, and it's a very, very, very engaging way of explaining the course. Following this, we have the pre-scene analysis, where we break down each pre-scene sitting into a number of videos, going through the whole document, but also adding a top 10 recommendations for what will come up in the exam, and also a strategic analysis where we put all the models you'd find in E2, for example, to the pre-scene itself, whichever that may be at the time. Alongside this, we provide an industry analysis. This is a document and accompanying video which help you give that contextual information in your exam. So, for example, if the pre-scene's on the oil industry, the industry analysis will break down the oil industry, the current topics, trends, issues, what the competitive market looks like, all those kind of aspects, all condensed into one so you can spend your time wisely in your study period. Following on from this, when you actually want to practice all this knowledge, we have mock exams for all of our materials. So StudyText has a generic mock exam based on the module, whereas the pre-scene analysis has mocks available to purchase that are based on that specific pre-scene, that are targeted to the key issues we believe will come up. And if you're not content with just doing those mock exams and practicing that way, we have a marking and feedback system where you can purchase the ability to send in your paper, have it marked by a CIMA qualified accountant, and get personalized feedback on whether you can improve X or Y area. And sort of finally, if you will, if you're feeling really underprepared and that exam is coming really, really soon, the master classes are offered by Astranti, and they're essentially a crash course in anything you could want for that topic. So if it's a master class on the pre-scene, it's going to give you absolutely everything that you could possibly need to know about the pre-scene in one really condensed sitting. Likewise, if it was the F3 masterclass, you would have all of F3 gone through in a very crash course style presentation and video link. You can also purchase it post-stream as opposed to viewing it live, all these kind of aspects. We are very, very confident that these materials will help you get the exam success that you want. So we have a pass guarantee. Provided you fill out a form which demonstrates that you have utilized our materials to a large extent and actually taken the time to study them, and you have unfortunately failed, we will offer you the same materials again for the next sitting as a consolidatory offer to ensure that you can get back on the horse and get that exam grade that you want. With that said, thank you very much for watching the sample video. I hope you enjoyed it and it gives you a lot of confidence in Astranti and your CIMA future.